FOMO. If you're not familiar with that acronym, it means fear of missing out. Are you somebody who constantly thinks that you have to say yes to everything? Because if you don't, you're going to miss out on the one event that will have changed everything. Welcome to Compass Online, everybody. My name's Jake. I'm honored to be here with you, and I hope you had a great Christmas season and a happy New Year. I'm excited to jump in together because honestly, I was not historically somebody that dealt with FOMO, not part of my experience. But honestly, all of that changed, and I can even pinpoint the day on which it changed. It was June 6th, 2018. So go back in time with me a little bit. On June 6th, 2018, I was working at a great engineering firm in Downers Grove, Illinois, and I was honestly just really busy. I felt swamped. There was so many deadlines coming up that I was struggling to keep my head above water. We've all been there before, right? Just way too busy for what's good for us. And on that fateful day, I got a phone call really early in the morning from a really good friend of mine, one who knows me well. And he said, "Hey, Jake, I have tickets for the Cubs game tonight." And now, I want you to know something about me. If you're not familiar with it, I am a huge Chicago Cubs fan. I love it. I go so far as to tell my wife that Wrigley Field is my happy place. I could be there all the time and be okay with it. So I get offered this chance to go to the Cubs game. But I'm so busy, the first thing I'm thinking in my mind is, you know what, I probably shouldn't do this. So like any good husband does, I came back with the response of, "Hey, let me check in with my wife and I'll let you know." Because the excuse to check in with my wife was going to be, I'm going to make her say no for me so I don't have to be the bad guy and I can just get more of my work done. And I'll never forget what happened next. You see, he wrapped up the phone call without raising his voice, without getting into any sort of details, but just simply said one line, "I really think that you should come." There was something so intriguing about that from this friend of mine, because that wasn't his style or personality, that one simple line, stated in a simple way, resonated with me. So I did get a hold of my wife, and instead of trying to have her say that I can't go, I spent the next couple of minutes talking her into letting me go, and she graciously, quickly agreed. Again, she knows the fandom that she married into. So fast forward to that night. I was told to be there a little bit early before the game. Great, no problem. And I was texted a specific gate to go to. Now, I've been to Wrigley Field many times, and I had no idea where this gate was. I had never heard of it before. I think it had like a 0.5 or a half after it, like it's an in-between gate. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. But I had no tickets. I didn't know what to expect. I was at the mercy of my friend. So I showed up, I met him, and we got ushered into this weird hallway that I had never seen before. And where did we end up? At a place almost underneath Wrigley Field. It was just a stunning food court, commons-looking area. And I realized that I was not in a typical place. Because mixed in with all of that, I see over in the corner of this area, the owner of the Chicago Cubs just hanging out and talking with a bunch of people like a common person. I couldn't believe it. So we were in this food area. I see over in the corner this weird thing from 2016 called a World Series trophy. And I was like, this is phenomenal. I go up to a concession stand in this area, and I'm looking at the menu, and I realize, one, there are no prices next to anything on the menu. And two, everything looked a little bit higher scale than the typical hot dogs, bratwursts, and nachos that you would typically see at a ballpark. So once I got up there, I realized that there were no prices on this because this was an all-inclusive location. All of the food that I could have ever wanted was free to me. All I had to do was ask. It was covered in the cost of the ticket. I was being treated like a VIP, not a super common experience, which is why I remember it so well to this day. All of this happened like an hour before the game. So about 30 minutes before first pitch, We decide we're going to go find our seats. So we walk down yet another hallway that I've never seen before in my entire life. And when we come out of there, what do I find? But our seats are 4 rows off of home plate, just barely on the first base side. We were in this area called Club 1914, an all-inclusive VIP location. We had waiters that were coming by just about once an inning to check to see if we needed anything else to make our stay more pleasurable. These seats were phenomenal. We were so close to the action that I could talk to the guys in the on-deck circle, and I did. We were so close that I could see how much the curveball was curving. We were so close to the action, I could tell you without a shadow of a doubt that there is a 0% chance that I could ever hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. This was the pinnacle of my Cubs fandom experience. And it all started for one simple reason. My friend knew me, and he had faith or confidence that I would have a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Have you ever had something similar to that happen? Did you know there's a story in Scripture where, let's take the baseball game aside, but there is a group of friends that talks to another and convinces him to do some additional things. We're going to study that scripture together because it's so important to realize that our faith is incredibly important and can do so much more than we might have initially believed. So let's get ready and jump in together. We are going to study the story found in Mark chapter 2 of Jesus and the paralytic. So a lot of times, if you've been in church circles before, you've heard this story because we tend to focus in on Jesus, and rightfully so. Or we focus in on the paralyzed man, and rightfully so. Or we might even focus in on the scribes that were present that had some doubts about what were going on, and again, rightfully so. But I want to spend some time today talking about the faith of these friends. You know, Jeff mentioned a couple of weeks ago how he wanted all of his points to start with the letter A, and I thought that was great. But instead of trying to come up with the work of doing that, I want to share the ABCs that we see play out in this story. The ABCs of faith. So let's start out by just setting the scene. We are in Mark chapter 2, and Jesus was at home in Capernaum. So we realize in Mark chapter 1 that Jesus has been out and about. He's been doing the work of ministry. He's been proclaiming the kingdom of God, and he's been healing people, and he's starting to get a reputation. He is becoming known. So much so that Jesus had to move from place to place just to try and get away and get some quiet time. You know, at the end of chapter 1 in Mark, it actually says that Jesus would just go out to deserted places to try and get a break, but the crowds would find him and follow him. That's kind of a similar thing of what we're continuing to see play out here at the beginning of chapter 2. Jesus is at home, or at a minimum, his home base. Maybe he was there to recharge. Maybe he was there to meet with his disciples. Maybe there was something else going on. But we know that Jesus was here. You know, and what we also see really quickly is that there were a lot of people that still found him out. Now, if you want to put this in a modern context of what this could have looked like, picture Taylor Swift going to your local Starbucks. She might just be there, and all of a sudden, she's going to get recognized. Kind of a big deal. People know her. And the more she gets recognized, the more friends will be pulling out their phones, texting their friends and families, "You'll never believe who's here," to where a crowd will start to form. And then a larger crowd of all of these fans will start to form and come around. Then the paparazzi will show up, and all of a sudden, you've just got this full-blown event, where is this a massive crowd of people. This is what is happening in the home that Jesus is staying at, minus the cameras and probably the coffee. So this is where we're going to jump in Mark chapter 2 in verse 2. You see, it says that so many people were gathered together that there was no more room, not even in the doorway. Now, unlike what would happen with the celebrity and fans and paparazzi, Jesus didn't try and peel off. He had compassion on those that were there, and he started preaching and teaching. So many people wanted to be so close to him that the house was so full that nobody could join in. Nobody could get any closer, so much so it came all the way out into the doorway and spilled out. And that is where we see the paralytic man and his 4 friends come into play. I hope you can picture all of this in your mind's eye as we get ready to keep going here, because it's one of those scenes where there's probably just a massive humanity and a small house, and Jesus is at the center of it. So what we see in Mark chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, it says they, the friends, they came to him, Jesus, and they were bringing a paralytic, carried by 4 of them. Since they were not able to bring the paralytic to Jesus because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him, and after digging through it, they lowered the mat on which the paralytic was laying. This leads to the first letter of the ABCs of faith that we see from these 4 friends. These friends had audacious faith. If you're not entirely familiar with the word, it really just means that you are willing to take bold risks. Now think about the risks that these 4 men were taking. They realized when they got to Jesus, they were hoping that this paralyzed man would meet Jesus and have an experience, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But when they got there, they realized that behind door number 1 was a crowd. So they could realize that I'm never going to get to Jesus. And door number 1 could have been, I'm just going to peel out and leave. We tried. It just didn't work out. Or the option behind door number 2 was, we're just going to elbow our way through this crowd with this man to try and get as close to Jesus as we possibly can. But they decided to opt for door number 3. Their bold risk was to go up onto the house that Jesus was staying in and vandalize the property, to tear the roof open completely so that there's a hole large enough to lower a man laying on a mat. Let's say he's a 6-foot man. You're looking at like a 6-foot by 3-foot rectangle, probably at a minimum, that would have been required to lower this person down. But I don't know if you realize this, that back in Jesus' time, this thing called air conditioning that you and I get to enjoy, it didn't exist. So where did people go to get a nice cool breeze, to spend some additional time? They would go on to their roof. So not only were these men vandalizing the roof of a property, taking that bold risk, they were also defacing this house's living room. Imagine you were Jesus for a moment. I know if I was in that situation and somebody wanted to see me and they ripped open my roof and my living room, I wouldn't want to see those people. I would want nothing to do with it. But these 4 had such confidence in who Jesus was that they decided that they were going to risk everything. They were going to take the bold step to make sure that their friend got as close to Jesus as possible. You know, I've got to experience some bold risks personally in my life just recently, and they come from my 8-year-old daughter. See, my daughter Tess is just in love with Jesus and in love with her friends, and she is willing to take bold risks. So much so that about a month or so ago, my wife and I were going through her backpack, trying to clear it out of some of the extra things that she takes to and from school. And we realized that she had about 8 copies of this devotional called Our Daily Bread. If you've run in church circles before, you're probably familiar with it. It's a small booklet that's just available that has devotional thoughts in it. So we went to Tess and was like, Tess, why are you taking these from church? What are you planning on doing with these? No joke, she looks my wife and I dead in the eye and says, I'm starting a Bible study on my playground at recess and after school. And I want these devotionals to give to all of my friends so we can be studying the same things together. My daughter gets it. She is willing to take the bold risk of talking to her friends about Jesus because she has that much faith in who he is and what he might be able to do for her friends. But these friends that we see in Scripture, they didn't just have an audacious faith. Let's move to the B here really quick. These friends had a borrowed faith. Or let's put it another way to make it a little bit more clear. Their faith was so strong that the paralyzed man was able to borrow their faith. Where do we see that come into play? Really, it's in Mark 2, and we're going to look just simply at verse 5. We see here, it says, seeing their faith, Jesus told the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." It's really easy to miss this. So let's read it one more time. Seeing their faith, Jesus told the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Jesus was moved to action by faith. But whose faith? That's the really interesting part in this to me. Because what Jesus definitively didn't say in this moment was seeing the paralytic man's faith. What Jesus said was seeing their faith. Now, I would argue that the paralytic man did have faith, and we could talk about that at some other point in time. But what Jesus is clearly doing is lumping in the faith of the community around this paralyzed man and seeing that lived out and played out, and having compassion because of that communal faith to do something amazing. These friends worked as a way to show their faith. They lived out what we now see in James chapter 2, verse 18. In that passage it says, "But someone will say, 'You have faith, and I have works.' James goes on to say, 'Show me your faith without works, and I will show you faith by my works.'" You see, these four friends, they wouldn't have had the book of James written down by this point in time in life, but they understood the assignment. They knew the concept. They realized that they needed to have their faith be in action. So think about what these four men had to endure so that their faith was visible, known, seen, and evident. They had to befriend a paralytic man from their town. They decided that they would each have to grab a corner of this man's mat and walk him. We don't necessarily know how long, but potentially miles upon miles of carrying practically just dead weight. When they saw the crowds, they realized that they weren't going to get close enough to Jesus, so they had to lug this paralyzed man up some outdoor steps to get onto the roof of this property. Then they had to do the physical labor of tearing this roof apart and carefully trying to lower this man down. Why? Why would they go through all of this effort? Or maybe we should personalize this a little bit. Why should we each have a strong enough faith that others can borrow it when theirs might not be strong enough? And it's really just this simple. Let's go back to the friends. They heard about Jesus and they knew what might be possible. That was enough. Is that enough for you and I? Do we realize who Jesus is? Have we heard enough of his stories that what we want to do is bring people to Jesus because of what might be possible? You see, these friends, they realized the impossible might start to seem possible if we could just get this person in front of Jesus. You know, we've got a great sermon series coming up starting next time we're together called Where We Met. But coming up after that, we're going to be doing this sermon series called He Gets Us, looking at the life of Jesus and realize he had some experiences that were very similar to ours. And because of that, we've been talking over the course of this last year all about relational evangelism, the importance of coming alongside people, befriending them for who they are and where they are, in hopes that we might be able to have some conversations about Jesus, in hopes that we might be able to do the work to bring these friends to Jesus. And honestly, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, to do that communally, how amazing would it be if your friend got to partner along with you and so many others in your sphere of influence that already love Jesus? The power in numbers we would see at play would just be staggering. But think about it from these friends' end as well. Right? We realize that there is a power and a freedom when there are multiple of us pulling in the same direction. So let's think of it this way. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, I've never had a conversation with anybody about Jesus before. If you're in a faith community, there's a corner of the mat waiting for you to pick up. Maybe you're an evangelist at heart. I want you to know that there is a corner of the mat available for you to pick up. If you're willing to open up your home and host a dinner party like we've been talking about over the course of the last year, maybe it's Super Bowl Sunday or some other point in time, there is a corner of the mat waiting and ready for you. If you have a friend that's dealing with anxiety, there's a corner of the mat waiting and ready for you. If you realize that you don't have anybody that comes to mind who doesn't know Jesus, one, pray about it. I bet there are people that would come to mind. But two, even if you don't, there will be others in our community of faith who do. You can jump in at a corner of their mat. If you only have faith the size of a mustard seed, there's a corner of the mat waiting for you. What are you willing to do so that people can see Jesus? Or maybe even more importantly, to be seen by Jesus. What are you going to be willing to work to do so your faith is on display? What are you going to do to strengthen your faith in Jesus over the course of these coming weeks? What are you going to do so that people will be able to see you have such a strong faith in Jesus that even when theirs seems weak to almost non-existent, there is something there that they can latch onto? My hope and my prayer is that we will be building that faith so it will be one that can be borrowed. Now, we've done A, we've done B. If you know your alphabet and you're tracking along, the next point here is going to be the C of faith. We are going to realize that these friends and the paralytic as well had compelling faith. Now, this is the point in the message where I want to let you know something. Jesus is still the main point and the main character of this passage. It's fun focusing in on some of these other characters, but the whole purpose of this passage is kind of multifold, and it all stems around who Jesus is. You see, because what we realize mixed in with the rest of this passage is that Jesus has the power to forgive sins. What we see in this passage is that Jesus has the power to perceive thoughts. He can read our minds. That's a dangerous thought at times, but we'll keep moving on there as well. Jesus also shows us that our spiritual well-being is actually more important than our physical well-being. The last thing that we see here, spoiler alert, Jesus has the ability to physically heal people as well. This wouldn't have been much of a story if the paralytic man didn't get up and walk, for a lot of different reasons, but it just would have lost maybe some of its luster, right? But that's not what we see happen. We see Jesus walk through the litany of things. He can read the thoughts of the scribes. He says that the spiritual well-being of this paralytic is more important. He heals him physically. He says, go take up your mat and sin no more. And that's exactly what happens. The paralyzed man immediately gets up and walks. Now, that's a great conclusion to the story, except for the fact that it's not the conclusion to the story. Did you know that? There's one verse that comes after it where we're going to see this compelling faith in action. It comes from Mark chapter 2, verse 12, where it says, as a result, they were all astounded and gave glory to God, saying, we have never seen anything like this. The crowds got to hear Jesus preach. They got to see faith in action. They got to realize who Jesus is. And the end result, it wasn't just the physical healing of the paralyzed man. It wasn't even just the miracle of him receiving salvation. Go and sin no more. Nobody besides Jesus has the authority to say that. What we see here is that not only did these things happen for the one, but everyone present was led to glorify God because of it. All. And that's my prayer for all of us this week. And as we go into the rest of this year, as we get into our He Gets Us series, my prayer is that we would have enough faith that we are willing to do the work of relational evangelism, of developing deep, personal, meaningful relationships with people who are far from God, and doing the same thing with those who already love Jesus, so that we can partner together as a church family to do some things that we would have never expected. These friends expected the paralyzed man would probably get up and walk. They didn't have an exit plan ready to go, but they didn't know what else was going to happen. The true ending to the story was more mind-blowing than they could have ever realized, because they knew they were in the presence of the Son of God. They were with Jesus. Sins were forgiven. And because of the faith of a few, through the power of Jesus at play with one, all glorified God. Now, I want to use that to just close with a quick story. And it's actually the first story that we started out our time with together. You see, I told you all about this great game that I got to go to, this wonderful experience that I had. But you might have realized that I didn't talk to you guys at all about what happened in the game. So what did happen in the game? Well, for starters, I ended up on TV. Well, kind of. Like, I half ended up on TV. Legitimately, half of my body is on TV, if you look really closely. But that's not even the really exciting thing. You see, going into the ninth inning, the Cubs were facing the Phillies and were down 5-3. And all of a sudden, the bases were loaded. And there were 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth inning. And the man at bat had 2 strikes on him. He was down to the last strike available, and the game would have been over. And I don't know if you know anything about this, but this man's name is Jason Hayward. If you're a Cubs fan, you might remember him fondly from the 2016 World Series because he gave a great motivational pep talk. But when it came to actually batting, hitting the ball as a Chicago Cub wasn't his strong suit. I still love the guy. He still does things that I would never be able to do, but he wasn't exactly the man that I wanted to see at the plate at this time. So what happened? On the final pitch, this.
The 2-2 pitch. There's a drive deep right. Cubs win! Cubs win on a grand slam by Hayward.
A grand slam. The game ended with a walk-off, 2-out, 2-strike grand slam. I have never heard a crowd get so loud in the entirety of my life. We were all celebrating. We were going nuts. And I had the extra benefit of this being such an amazing experience. And that is where this and the story of the paralyzed friends kind of join in together. You see, my friend knew that I was going to have a once-in-a-lifetime experience just by the seats and the VIP passes that we had. But you know what my friend didn't know? The ending to the story. My friend knew that we were going to have a wonderful time, but he didn't know how much we were going to celebrate. He knew that he and I would leave differently than when we came, because we're never going to have that experience again. But we didn't expect all around us to be joining in with such a raucous celebration. My hope and my prayer for this new year is simply that as we do the work of relational evangelism, we would take a piece of these friends with us and realize that there is no safer place to be than the feet of Jesus. That is where the paralyzed man needed to be, at the safest place on earth, seen by the love and compassion of Jesus. This paralyzed man, it's not recorded that he said a single word throughout the course of this story. And yet Jesus was moved with compassion. He saw their faith. He forgave the sins of the paralyzed man, and his life was never the same again. May God do something in the lives of our friends, and so far beyond that, may it ripple out in ways that we would never even begin to imagine as we work through 2024 together. With that being said, let's take a few moments to pray to that end. God, we celebrate the fact that we can know who Jesus is. I pray that our faith would grow so much because of simply that. May we do the work of growing our faith. May people see the tangible ways that we love Jesus and others. And may it be so rich and strong and compelling that people will have no other excuse but to wonder what that is and why that is. And then, God, may you do the work that only you can do because of the person and work of Jesus. Would you see fit over the course of the coming weeks, months, years ahead for people to continue to hear the good news of Jesus because of us? God, may they do that not even because of us, but just because you love them so much that you have sent Jesus here to be known, to be able to be a sacrifice on our behalf so we can know and love you, so that we can be in right standing with you. God, strengthen our faith in ways that will cause our friends' friends, our friends' friends, and God, the ripple, may it be unending of just the work that you are going to continue to do. It's all in Jesus' name alone that we pray. Amen.